We'll now call the meeting of Waco City Council on November 21st, 2017 to order at 3 p.m. Welcome guests. All council members are present. Please join us for a moment of silence. Thank you. We'll now recess the regular session and convene to work session with a report from the city manager.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council, and good afternoon. We do have one change to the agenda today, and that is on the second public hearing, which is item PH 2017-993. The last part of that item is for an incentive to GE Walker Associates, and we need to bring that back as a part of a new request after we take it back to the TIF board for a minor amendment. So the rest of that item is okay for consideration, and we passed out an amended ordinance for your consideration tonight. Okay. We had two informal reports in the packet, and the first was an update on the effect of rent-to-own businesses on police resources, and the second was an update on the landfill siting project.
I had just a couple of questions on that one.
Okay.
And I know that we've got an offsite next week, so I hope we can talk about this more at length next week on some of these issues. But I'm just taking these one by one. Continue, and I'm just looking at your informal report, the
Okay.
IRC here. And I'm glad that we're continuing to look at other landfill sites, obviously. But we're going to continue the landfill study and looking at distances greater than 15 miles. Are we going to come to at least an understanding of what we're talking about 15 miles from? Because it seems like we keep getting hung up in, is it Highway 6 and Highway 84? Is it the City Hall, or what is it? So I would just urge that as we continue this study that we all agree, at least on a methodology for what we're measuring to and from, and because it becomes really important when you're talking about hauling route distance and the economics of the whole thing, which really encompass both the first two issues. So I really want to make sure we're all thinking the same way, and because it seems like what we've done in the past has kind of gone down a trail, and then we got to kind of haul it all back in, and the math isn't right. But so I would urge that we'd figure out what that math is going to be.
Yes, our goal would be to get consensus on that.
And then
I guess I'm not quite following you, Jim. Your concern is, did you let us?
the rate.
For
Okay,
me.
I'm sorry, Alice. The rate analysis study, comparative study that we saw last week or 2 weeks, last meeting, included, the study was done from where you park the trucks to where the landfill site is.
Right, okay.
It did not take into account where you drive those trucks to pick up the trash, and then drive from that point to the landfill site. So the way the math worked is the closer the trucks were to the landfill site, the better the analysis the more favorable that site would become.
Okay.
So if there was a site on the north side, again, this is kind of a story problem in math, but if there was a place on the north side, it wouldn't take into account that you could go from the garage to the hauling routes and just haul it to the landfill site from there. You wouldn't have to go back to the garage.
Okay, I guess that must be where I'm failing to follow you right there. But, okay, go ahead.
Well, that's really.
Maybe it'll get clearer.
That's the core of the issue is that we started with the city center, we started eliminating sites using City Hall as city center. And we were saying, okay, anything within 15 miles of City Hall, we're gonna chop out because it would take a transload station. And we're even thinking about that logic may be not 100%
Okay.
right.
Okay.
But
I
then
just
when we
wanted to make sure I'm following you.
Yeah, because to me, Allison, the inconsistency was in the second stage of the elimination of the study, we switched about, 7-8 miles south and created the city center calculations from there on Highway 84 and Highway 6,
Okay.
which skews sites if they're north of town or east of town or west of town.
Dale, am I correct, though, that I thought we used 18th and Waco Drive as the city center for the SCS for the initial study?
And I would agree. I think we did use different locations initially, and then we kind of launched on the side of the Highway 6 and,
Well, we did for the hauling route analysis, but I'm talking about for city center for the
Yeah,
purposes of the
it was-
15 mile. I
it
thought it
was
was
around
18th and Waco Drive. Is that, do you remember, Wiley? I know we've talked about this so many different ways.
yeah.
Actually, I thought it was like Bosque and Highway 84, but
But anyway,
Okay,
I
okay.
think what would be helpful for the staff is, and I do think we need to reach consensus on this. Again, it would be helpful, Jim, if you could articulate how you think it should be done.
Yep.
That would be helpful to us, and then we can share that with the rest of the council.
And I've taken the New Gen framework, and again, I commend New Gen, they came up with a very nice framework to figure incremental costs and all that. The input was just wrong, in my opinion, but I did replicate their framework and came up with a new calculation, not knowing what we want to use as city center. I was using City Hall because that's what I thought SCS used. But I think ultimately, we want to figure out where those routes are and figure out what the geo center of those is, because that's who we're serving.
So the geo center of the routes, and just, if you could just help me understand how you would determine that.
Take the addresses of all the users.
You just want all the addresses of the users, and regardless of how much demand we have on each of those users, it's just
So on the
straight.
residential one.
Okay, just residential only? Okay.
Well, in the commercial, I think we'd have its own geo center. You have its own-
Do you, I mean, we can do it either way. I guess if you say residential, that simplifies it,
But there's 4 parts to the if you look at the New Gen study, there's 4 parts to the calculation.
right?
There's roll-off, there's commercial, there's,
And if we take all 4 of those, then what would we do?
I just think it would be, I'm arguing against myself a little bit, but I think it would be unfair on the residential part of the calculation to use commercial users.
Right.
You would use the commercial users for that part of the calculation.
So what I was trying to get at is if we have 4 separate dots as the center, based on those 4 categories, how do you then resolve, what do you do with those 4 dots?
There's 4 different, if you look at the New Gen, there's 4 different independent calculations for distance and haul distance route.
Right,
So you just take each one of those, figure out where the center is, go from the garage to the center to the landfill site, regardless of whether it's northwest, east, south, wherever.
right, okay,
Because the New Gen guy, Mr. Yankee, was said, well, they're all south, so we can,
Right.
we don't have to do that extra part of the study, which
Right.
is,
and we want to do that. I was just trying to get clarity on how you'd like to see it, because I really think that in any scenario that we lay out, somebody could find something wrong with how we calculated it.
I don't disagree that they're, but to not use the customer base as part of your
I mean,
calculation.
we'll do it the way you're suggesting. That'll be one of the options, and if the council agrees with that,
Yeah, I mean,
we're fine with it.
I want the math validated, and we want everybody
Okay.
to talk about it.
and I just want to correct, I meant Bosque and Valley Mills Drive, because Bosque and 84 don't intersect, so that would really be a good one.
Bosque and Valley Mills Drive. Okay.
All right, and then the time, I like all these things, if it were, again, we can talk about this at the next meeting, I guess. But I guess the last 2 are the ones that, or maybe the second to last one, where we're talking about continuing the permitting work.
Yes.
At some point, I would think, first of all, how much approved funding is left to spend? Do we know on that?
I think we actually have some work that needs to be brought back. But our direction so far has been to continue working on the existing landfill site until another site is chosen. So until we get either a resolution that says we're going to another site or to stop on the site that we have, the staff is continuing to work on that. And so are our engineers and so are the lawyers, because we got the lawsuit.
That's what I'm thinking. Again, council could talk about this at the offsite, but I think we have enough evidence that there are viable alternative sites here, and they're available. And at some point, we got to say, let's hit pause until we can find the right site.
So you would want to continue working on other sites, but not the existing site that we have. Is that what you're saying?
To the level that we're doing the engineering work, yes.
Okay. I'm just getting clarity.
But
And I
again,
wanna
I'm
be-
not asking for a vote here.
I want to clarify something too. I think you're talking about discussing this at the retreat. Is that what you're?
I suppose, or whenever the next
'Cause
appropriate time to
Well,
talk
because
about it.
we do not have this on the agenda for the retreat because we wanted to have as much of this conversation as possible
Right
in a
now.
public setting, which is a retreat is a public meeting, but it's not televised and it's not, it's not covered that way. So it is not currently on the retreat agenda.
Well, to that end, I mean, I don't know that you can't put these to a vote, can you? I'm just of the opinion that we should, particularly as we looked at the rate study last week, I think there were some shortfalls in the study, but we're not talking about doubling the price to the residential
Right.
users. It's only a marginal increase over a long period of years, and I think we can sharpen that up too. At some point, I think it owed to the taxpayers not to be spending money on the old Dorena Road site if we're not 100% sure that's where it's going to go.
So, but we want to continue working on the other sites, even though we know that's not 100%.
Again,
I'm
work,
just
I think,
struggling.
no, I agree with you.
And I'm not trying to be argumentative, but I am trying to get consensus from the whole council on what
And I
you want us
acquiesce,
to do.
I acquiesce your point, but I think that we're talking about formal engineering work by SCS. I don't propose that we do that on any site, any proposed alternative site, until we all agree that that's where we want to go.
Well, and I will continue to take the position that I've taken all along, which is we do need to continue to work on that site. And as we look at other sites, I do not personally believe that any of the 3 sites that we've identified are good sites and viable sites. That's one of the reasons we've asked to expand the distance a little bit to try to find a site that really will work, and then we can compare the costs. But, I believe there are safety issues with Site 21 that cannot be overcome. And I would not vote in favor of that site. But I agree with you that the differences in rate impact were less than I think many of us expected them to be. And so I think because of that, it makes sense to look a little bit farther out to see if we can really find a viable site, and then we can compare the two. And so I think that's what we're trying to do. But, I mean, I think most of the council took the other 2 sites and said those really are not viable. I think when you look at the safety issues of 21, to me, it's not viable. So I really want to find a viable alternate site, and then we can compare 1 or more alternate viable sites.
And Mayor, if I may piggyback with what you said, there's no way that I would vote for Site 21, along with the same concerns that I have about the safety issues at 21. So
Okay.
that's 2.
And that's, I would guess, because of the rate deal. Well, I think once we figure out, that's why I really want to get to the bottom of the rate study as well, because I think that 21 and OLR are very close when you get the right math on there.
21's got a lot of safety issues to me, and I think I expressed that in executive session. But I'm trying to be careful, Jennifer, I know you're looking at me. But I couldn't vote for 21. Even if all of us went yes, I'd still be no.
I think those are my only comments, just, and I guess that we move, as we're getting a timeline together, do we have anything in mind developing a timeline? I guess the 4th point, are we going to try to bring it back into council? I guess there's only 1.
Yes, we have some additional information later today, and then we anticipate bringing back a work session probably in January.
Good, thanks.
And I'm comfortable with your work plan and the timeline, and I think our retreat agenda is particularly full, and I would prefer this not be included in that for the same reasons the mayor has already enumerated.